What if humans could breathe underwater like fish? Humans are land mammals, and we have been living out of water for millions of years. And yet we spend an incredible amount of time thinking about what it would be like to be able to breathe underwater. This is likely because of our curiosity about other life forms in the sea, or because there is just something relaxing about being submerged. But what if breathing underwater wasn't just a dream but a reality? How would human bodies need to change? Would it be more trouble than it's worth? Let's find out. Hi, and welcome to What If. Now back to what ifs. Breathing underwater would require some pretty big changes. The first step towards underwater breathing would be gills. Fish use gills to absorb oxygen from water and expel carbon dioxide. Their gills allow them to extract dissolved oxygen while filtering out impurities. To do this, they take in water through their mouths and pass it over their gills, where tiny blood vessels absorb the oxygen and release carbon dioxide. The most straightforward way for humans to breathe underwater would be to grow gills. However, these wouldn't be similar to fish gills. After all, humans are mammals, and we give birth to live babies instead of laying eggs. Also, growing external gills would make us vulnerable to predators and limit how far we could venture onto land. Instead, human gills would need to be internal and hidden. They'd also have to be massive. A pair of human-sized gills would need to be about 250 times larger than a fish's gills to extract the same amount of oxygen. These giant gills would be covered with hundreds of thousands of tiny blood vessels called capillaries. Each capillary would be around 3 inches long, longer than your forearm. This huge surface area would allow the capillaries to extract enough oxygen to keep the body running. Once the oxygen was absorbed, the blood would travel to the lungs, which would remove the last of the impurities before sending the oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. Speaking of lungs, one of the main differences between fish and humans is that humans have lungs while fish don't. Lungs allow us to breathe in air, but they're not used for extracting oxygen from water. That's why scuba divers can only stay underwater for a few minutes at a time. Their lungs are simply not built for underwater breathing. So for us to breathe underwater, we'd have to abandon our lungs altogether and get rid of our air-based respiratory system. Our throats and windpipes would collapse without the air pressure keeping them open. Then again, we wouldn't need them anymore, so no big loss. Well, except for the part where we need air to make our voices. Without our throat and windpipe, we wouldn't be able to talk, sing, or even scream. And let's face it, we love screaming. Okay, so gills and no lungs, what else would we need? How about a new heart? Compared to land mammals, fish hearts are relatively small and simple. They only have 1 ventricle and 2 chambers compared to our 4 chambers and more complex structure. We'd need hearts similar to those of sharks and tuna, which can pump around 40 liters of blood per minute. For comparison, the average human heart pumps around 5 liters per minute. This increased capacity would help deliver oxygen throughout our new aquatic bodies. However, that raises another issue: blood. Fish blood contains a special protein called hemoglobin, which helps carry oxygen throughout their bodies. Hemoglobin has a much higher affinity for oxygen than the hemoglobin found in land mammals. This means that it binds to oxygen more easily. But it also has a higher affinity for carbon dioxide, which means it struggles to drop off this waste product. Human blood would need to evolve to resemble fish blood more closely in order to keep up with the demands of an aquatic lifestyle. Unfortunately, changing our blood chemistry could cause problems when we're on land. If we evolved to have higher levels of dissolved oxygen in our blood, then Earth's gravity would start to pull that oxygen out and into our tissues. This process would deprive our organs of oxygen while we're on land, making it difficult to survive outside of water. It seems that breathing underwater would only be possible if humans were permanently stuck in the water. But what if we didn't have to rely on gills and fish like adaptations? There's another way to get oxygen from water. Take a look at this beetle. It lives in ponds, streams, and lakes, and its larvae are commonly known as water boatmen. Its name might sound cute, but this beetle's secret is downright terrifying. Its skin allows it to breathe underwater by absorbing dissolved oxygen straight from the water. This is made possible by a special adaptation of its exoskeleton called the plastron. The plastron is a series of interconnected plates embedded with air pockets. As water flows over the plates, oxygen diffuses into the air pockets and gets absorbed through the beetle's skin. This process is called cutaneous respiration. Cutaneous respiration is common among amphibians. Salamanders often absorb more than 40% of their oxygen through their skin. And frogs can get by almost entirely without using their lungs as long as their skin stays moist. If we had skin like this, we could breathe underwater without needing gills. However, this would leave us defenseless against predators, especially since our skin would need to remain moist to work properly. Not to mention that the air pockets under our skin would make us incredibly buoyant, probably too buoyant. Imagine trying to walk underwater with a bunch of balloons glued to your chest. Humans aren't very good swimmers, but maybe we could become better swimmers and divers to compensate for our lack of gills or beetle-like skin. Some animals like dolphins and whales have evolved to have fluke-like tails that help them swim efficiently. Dolphins can reach speeds of around 22 miles per hour thanks to their flukes. While that's impressive, it's still less than half the speed of a blue whale, the fastest animal on Earth. Whales can reach speeds of up to 50 miles per hour. If humans had fluke-like tails, we could match the speed of the blue whale. Of course, there's no reason to think that our tail would behave exactly like a whale's tail. In fact, it would probably be more like a mermaid's tail. That is, it would probably get tangled and make swimming almost impossible. But never let it be said that what if didn't try. Okay, so what if we kept our lungs, grew gills, and swapped our legs for a dolphin tail? We'd be able to breathe underwater, but we'd need to grow fins to keep from floating away. Wait, does that mean we'd also have to grow flippers? Yes, we would. In order to stay underwater, we'd need flippers. Otherwise, we'd float to the surface and drown. All right, we've evolved into the ultimate underwater creature. Part human, part fish, part amphibian, part mammal. But what would an underwater human look like? Well, first, we'd be absolutely massive. Blue whales are the largest animals on Earth. Even the smallest blue whale is bigger than the largest dinosaur. Growing to a size like this would ensure we have the necessary body mass to stay underwater. Of course, this would make moving around on land extremely difficult, if not impossible. But that wouldn't matter, because we'd be living in water full time. The rest of our body would look much like a shark's. We'd have gills behind our eyes, a dorsal fin along our back, and a tail fin to steer ourselves through the water. Our skin would be smooth and moist to help with cutaneous respiration. And our limbs would be gone, replaced by a single set of flippers. We'd have webbed feet and hands, a shark-like nose and mouth, and maybe even some suction cup-like discs to attach ourselves to rocks and seaweed. To top it all off, we'd have the ability to generate our own light with bioluminescent markings all over our body. With all these changes, there's a pretty good chance that we wouldn't be able to reproduce anymore. Maybe we'd lay eggs or give birth to live young. And maybe our offspring would look like us. Or maybe they'd look like something entirely different. It's unlikely that any living things on Earth would resemble us anyway. So what's the point of worrying about it? Ultimately, there's really no reason to want to breathe underwater. Yes, it would be cool to explore shipwrecks, coral reefs, and the deepest trenches without needing tanks of compressed air. But is it worth giving up everything we love about life on land? It's hard to say. Maybe someday we'll figure out how to breathe underwater. Until then, we can always visit the ocean and marvel at the creatures who can.